YouTube, it's Diaphone, and today we're going to be doing a Goldlewis guide. We're going to be doing an overview, talk about his strengths and weaknesses, talk about his normals, specials, combos, and then we're going to talk about strategy, how to play him, how to approach neutral, how to mix up characters, etc. Timestamps are in the description. One thing before we start though, if you appreciate the content, want to see more guides, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and helps me make more guides like this. So yeah, let's talk about Goldlewis. So he's pretty obvious by his general size, but he's your typical heavy, slow character. Arxis kind of describes him as a power type. The main things is that he excels at offense. His pressure is really good, his mix-up is really good, and he does crazy amounts of damage. And for this, he sacrifices mobility, just like any other big character, right? So let's talk about some of his strengths. Like I said, his offense is really good. His damage is really high. I think he currently has the highest damage in the game. I was talking to Ambi earlier. He said, if you want to play soul guilt-free, play Goldlewis. And that's exactly it. You got soul damage, but he's attached to a bigger body character. He has things that do good chip, good mix-up, and give tons of plus frames. 6 of his Behemoth Typhoons are plus on block. The fact that a character has a plus, I think it's plus 12 on block overhead, that's in my opinion not reactable, it's very, very strong and does crazy amount of damage on chip. Look at that chip damage. The fact that your mix-up tools are plus on block is just really strong and makes him a force to be reckoned with. Not to mention that he can kill you off of essentially one hit. I was lobbing this sequence out earlier, and off of one Behemoth Typhoon, and keep in mind Goldlewis, one of his other strengths is he has a lot of health, right? He has the third most health in the game, so he can survive a lot more than, let's say, Chip, Milia, or pretty much most of the cast can. So off of one sequence, do almost all their health, and on a character that has a crazy amount of damage, health, right? His mix-ups really shows off his strong mix-up. I did a low in the overhead. You can't react to any of that. His Oki's super tight, and yeah, you just do a crap ton of damage with this character. That's the main reason you want to play this character, is to do really cool sequences like that. And the other thing is, as you kind of see in the corner, he gets mix-up of all his knockdowns. So most of your combos are going to be something like this. And you get Oki. You can do safe jumps, you can throw the meaty Thunderbird, you can just do a high-low. Everything he has essentially leads in the mix-up, which is really good. And so some of his cons, you know, his matchups vary due to the character archetype. Characters that can keep him out, such as like Axel, or can take advantage of his poor mobility, like Ramathal, are naturally going to be a bad matchup for him. He also has bad defense, so no reversal outside of super, but he also can't really jump out of a corner. And his defensive normals like 2P, 5P, 2K, 6P are also kind of lacking on defense, right? A lot of characters have like a 6 frame 2K. Goldlewis is 8. His fastest normal is a 6 frame 2P, which again is the slowest in the game. I think there's only like 2 or 3 other characters that their fastest normal is 6 frames, but it doesn't even chain into itself. You have to link, which when you're mashing, it can make it very inconsistent, right? His 5P whiffs on crouchers, it's also a little slow. His 5K is just 10 frames. You don't want to be mashing that in pressure. And then a 6P, it'll just whiff on crouching. So he has a lot of, how to say, trouble getting out of bad situations, but thankfully, you know, you can take advantage of the game systems such as YRC and having a ton of health, so you can get potentially 2 bursts around to kind of make up for these cons. All right, so let's talk about his normals. Like I said, 5P, 2P, these are kind of like your Abari or Tamash. One cool thing to mention about his 2P is that it is plus on block, so you can kind of use it as like a frame trap. Not a lot of characters really have a plus on block jab, so good to note. You can do something like this and that will frame trap. It means you can also link a jab into another jab. The jab is also cancelable, so sometimes like on pressure, if I need to throw out a quick button, I'll do something like 2P into Behemoth Typhoon. Which is pretty good. Or if they're really close, I'll do like 2P, but it doesn't have quite the best range. 5P's actually okay as like an anti-air. So as like a preemptive anti-air, think of like if you guys have ever played KOF, it's like a KOF 5P, or where you can like do something like that. And you actually get decent damage off of it. You can go into super. But typically I just go into the 684 Behemoth Typhoon. and you get Oki and you can just run your mix. So for that purpose, it's actually pretty good. His 6P is interesting, right? Like we said, it doesn't hit people that are crouching, which is very unique for a 6P, but it has a very good anti-air hitbox. And will cleanly win. I recommend always canceling 6P into his 684 Behemoth Typhoon. We'll mention that Behemoth Typhoon a lot because it's really good and leads into Oki. Some people will cancel into that works, but generally you cancel into that. If on counter hit, you get a combo and then you can run your mix up from there. Unfortunately, this doesn't combo on non-counter hit. So you sometimes get a weird situation like that. All right, so let's talk about his kicks. He doesn't have a 6K, unlike most characters, but he has a 2K. It's a little slow, but you still need to use it. It's his fastest slow option. Typically, you cancel this into 2D, and you get a combo like that. The other thing is you could do 5K 2D. Same idea. Is 5K, if you want like a quick button to stick out on neutral, that'll like catch dashes, it's really active. So it's actually pretty good against dashes or stuff like Maze, Dolphin, because again, I think it has like over 10 active frames, which means it's out there for a while. So you can just kind of like throw it out, buffer it into this 684 Behemoth Typhoon. All right, so his S normals, this actually is a pretty good normal. It's jump cancelable on block up close. I think it's minus, but not that minus. So you can kind of do stuff like 5S, 5S. It's really good to jump cancel this because you can do 5S into like JD, and that's really hard for people to react to. So they kind of have to like preemptively mash it. As you can see, his jump arc's pretty low, and that's actually it's not the best for like getting zoned out. It's really good for like applying pressure and kind of like establishing a mid-range presence. But typically you also will cancel this into some of the Behemoth Typhoons as well. It's just generally like it's a good option to do when they're knocked down because you have so many different options from it. Is 2S, I don't like it too much. It does have some uses. So 5S is probably like his best poke in my opinion. It's 10 frames, which this range being 10 frames is actually really good. So you want to use this button a lot. However, against some characters like Faust, your 5S will whiff. So you want to use 2S, and that's the main time I'll do 2S. It has similar range, as you can see. It actually goes a little farther, but it's a little bit slower. So in 5S, again, it's really good button. Typically, you buffer this into the 684 Typhoon. So if you're just a neutral, this works on non-counter hit, by the way. You get 83 damage and you get Oki. Again, on other characters, this will be more damage too. You can also on counter hit on 5S and 2S, go into the overhead, and get pretty good damage. So far 5S into the overhead Behemoth Typhoon is also a really good option. His 5H, I don't like it too much. You'll sometimes use it in combos, you'll sometimes use it in frame traps, but generally I think it's better to frame trap with your Behemoth Typhoons because you get a high-low compared to just this. But you do get big damage off of it. 2H, again, this is only combos or frame traps. You're not going to be doing something like this in neutral. Please don't use that in neutral. You'll just get whiff punished and die. You know, it's good for frame trap because it does on normal hit like 5S 2H combos into that, and you get some pretty good damage like that. Yeah, it's very slow. It's just too slow to use, but you can use it in pressure as like another frame trap layer. Same thing with 5H, so you can cancel and then you can still reach with like your overhead and stuff. But the issue is like after 5H, you can't really do a low because your lows will whiff. Typically, I like to go 5S into the overhead instead of going the 5S and the 5H, but it does have its uses, especially if you know they're going to mash, they just explode. Also has a 6HS, again, same kind of thing. It's so laggy that it's like scary to use. I think Behemoth Typhoon has a little bit better recovery and it's more disjointed and it reaches about the same distance. That's reach a little bit further, but the other issue is like you get a better knockdown off Behemoth Typhoon too. So I don't like to do this too much. There's probably stuff you can do like that and then like push them out. You can do like this in the machine gun, but like it's not really that good because it's just very slow, right? 5D, yeah, it's just a standard dust. I don't use it too much because this move is just like a better version of 5D, uncharged, and then charged full dust, you know, just like every other character, it's the same speed. It's pretty good, like, because you can do stuff like this.
Thunderbird.
And so you get like decent damage on hit and then on block.
Thunderbird.
But yeah, on block, you can like kind of use that to disguise your 5D. But generally, I don't like to do 5D with this character. You have really good tools to mix up that are less reactable. 2D is just your standard sweep. Nothing really special about it. I don't like to use it in neutral. It's kind of slow, where this will work better. And that has more range. But you can use it, you know, dash up 2D and something like that is a thing. His jump normals, jump P is a pretty good air-to-air. It's less committal than JS. You know, you can do shit like this, like that, and come down, where JS you can't really do that. But generally I like to do JS. JK's it's pretty good for jump-ins, has decent active. It also insta overheads if they're standing, so you can do like fuzzy stuff with it. Oh, okay, that's cool. Wait, actually, make sure you can't burst. Oh, you can burst. You can burst, but you can't YRC. So JS is your go-to air-to-air. Typically, if you're trying to like get people out of the corner. The good thing to know is, you know, Goldlewis actually has an air dash, and he can air dash cancel. So you can actually do some pretty, you know, pretty good stuff like that. JS, I pretty much always try to buffer an air dash, and you can like sometimes you can link a jump K after too, which is pretty nice. If you have to hit him at like the right angle. So you actually get some pretty decent damage there, and I should have went for the 684 Typhoon, but you guys get the idea. j.HS is pretty good. It goes for cross up, so if you're trying to cross up, j.HS is your go-to cross up. Also, if they're like running at you, you typically want to do j.HS, because in case they go under you, you'll still hit them with the cross up. So you can also do on Oki stuff. Well, you would go for that. You go for something like this. And you can hit them cross up, which is pretty nice, right? JD is probably the main jump normal you want to do though. Just spamming this in neutral is like, it controls a lot of space, as you can see. And you can cancel this into Behemoth Typhoon. Typically like the 4-8-6 one. Or that one as well. And on counter hit, you get big damage, right? So like, let's say you jump back and you hit something, you go for that, and then you can literally run up and get a 5S. Because there's just so much block stun on this. I guess technically something optimal would be like this. And then you literally get a side swap. So you can see like throwing Goldlewis can be kind of scary. Because he can come down with a JS and just completely fuck up your day. So you can get some good combos after JD. So sometimes you want to cancel, sometimes you don't. Depends if you think you'll get the hit and the spacing, right? Because on normal hit, you can't go for that. But let's talk about Behemoth Typhoon. Let's talk about his specials. So Behemoth Typhoon, I feel like I have to bring up the Behemoth Typhoon chart. Should I go in this Behemoth Typhoon like every time? In this Behemoth Typhoon, Goldlewis. In this Behemoth Typhoon, Goldlewis does a bunch of damage and hits you overhead. So quick question for the guide. Select all squares with the 89632H Behemoth Typhoon. It hits this one because he goes 89632. You literally just follow the arc. Thankfully, his inputs for his Behemoth Typhoon are very intuitive. This shit is so funny. In this Behemoth Typhoon, Goldlewis fucks your shit up. So this chart looks really intimidating at first, right? He has 8 different versions of Behemoth Typhoon. They all guard crush, which means that you can't YRC on block and it does a lot of chip. 6 of them are plus on block. Basically everything but the ones that start with the forward direction. The way I like to think of it is I kind of group them into categories, right? Everything that starts in the up direction is a mix-up. That's your fast overhead and your low attack. The forward direction is your quick startup move, right? The down direction is your combo filler, I guess you could say. And the left direction is, or the back direction is the stuff that goes really, really far. That's a very generic way to put it, but let's dive into each one of the Behemoth Typhoons. The issue with some of the ones at the top of the chart is that they require an 8 input, right? Which means you have to jump. So if I'm trying to do 684, I get this, right? On the ground, unless I do like some like super optimal input, right? Or like I disguise the input like with a jump, which basically means you jump, you input the direction, and then you press it. You're gonna be jumping, right? And technically you can do it like on the ground. I've done it before. You just have to input it really fast and skip a couple of the diagonals, because in order to do Behemoth Typhoon, you don't actually have to hit all 5 directions that have circle. You only have to hit the first one, the last one, and then one of the 3 middle ones. Typically, like if I'm trying to do it something in neutral, like I'll just like whiff a jab, or I'll do it after a jump. I'll do it after a whiff normal. So I recommend, unless you're like the Goldlewis god, don't practice standing 684 inputs. But this one's really good. Basically, it's your combo ender. So you can do stuff like this, and it ends in Oki. Generally, you don't use it for pressure because this one's minus on block. The other one he has that starts in the forward direction is actually very similar. It's actually basically a worse version of the 684 version, but you don't have to input up. So in neutral, if you're just like dashing forward and doing something, you want to use this version because you have a high chance of fucking up the 684. So yeah, in combos, use the 684 version. In neutral, use the 624 version. All right, so let's talk about his down specials. You can also do these standing on the ground, both of these standing on the ground, right? It ends in up, but as long as you press the button right when you press up, you won't jump, right? So I can do these pretty consistently. Sometimes I'll throw out the 2, 6, 8 version, like just preemptively if they're like trying to do some air shit. Generally, I use this as a frame trap and as combo filler, right? So one of the staples in this pressure is doing stuff like this. Right? You do the overhead version and then you get your plus frames. But you see, I just got hit out of that. So what's your counter to this? You do this version. You do the 2, 6, 8 version. And then obviously on counter hit, you can get big damage. Depends where you are. Typically, like, especially in the corner, they just explode. So I like to do is it's either a combo extender, combo ender, or as a frame trap. His other version, think of this as like it's a low, but it side switches, right? So this is part of your mix up. And it also catch people mashing. It side switches, so you don't really want to be doing this near the corner, but in mid screen, you can get some pretty decent damage off this. You just get something simple like that, but still that's a good amount of damage, and then you get Oki after and you can keep running your mix. So think of it as like a mix-up tool. You can also use it in some combos, but those combos are a little more technical, so I won't be covering them in this guide. All right, let's talk about his back inputs. 4, 2, 6 is, think of this as like you're swinging for the fences, right? If you're like at this range and you just hope they press a button, if they get hit, they just die. Typically, you're only doing this version in the corner because it wall bounces. And obviously a wall bounce mid-screen is not going to do you much good, and you don't even get the best Oki. And then 684 special, which in my opinion is probably one of his best. It's a plus on block forward advancing overhead, which if that sounds good, it's because it is really good. And as you can see, if you do it after something like a 2H, you can sometimes get a trade, but a lot of times you'll actually just beat out their normal and they'll just explode. I don't know what you can actually get off this. You get a lot of damage off a trade. That could probably be optimized too. The biggest reason why you want to do this is that's plus. You're plus 12 and you can do a bunch of cool things, right? You can run up and throw them if they're really respectful. Oftentimes, like, you do something like this. That will usually beat them out. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Fun fact, if you want to test what options you have after guard break, apparently guard breaks are counted as a hit in this game. Why? I have no clue. But we can actually, we can test them out. We'll have them out crouch P. So like the game counts it as a hit. So this is how you can test it. And you see how late that is? And you can do stuff like that. You could do that. Typically, I'll just like run up and do another 5S into overhead again. And for his other Behemoth Typhoons, they start off with 2 inputs. So again, you're not going to be able to do the stand, either of them standing, but typically what you'll do is like you'll do it from like a 5S. So you do 5S into a overhead, and that knocks down on a hit. All right, let me show you what it looks like on a hit. And you see, like, it's so plus, you can run up and get a grab before the jab even comes out. It's really good. So this is like my go-to like layer 1 mix is I'll do the overhead and see what they do. Especially if they're not FDing it, you can go in, you can just like, I call it the infinite block string. But you can like, you can just like keep doing it, and it's really obnoxious to deal with. He also has a low. The low is like good in the sense that like, you get a combo on hit, which is quite good, unlike the overhead on hit. But even if they block it, it's still really, really plus. And you can run up, get a throw. You can run up, do another 5S in the overhead. So you could do something like that. It's just like, you can, and look how much chip that did on block. And it's like, it's all plus, right? Which is why I think this character's offense is actually crazy. The one disadvantage to this though, let's say they're mashing with a 6-way normal. You'll just get hit out, right? They can also jump out of that too. You have to condition them into not mashing, and obviously Goldlewis has tons of ways to do that. The overhead, on counter hit, you get a combo. Same exact combo, you know, 2S into the overhead. Yeah, it's pretty good. And once you condition them, you can start going for the low and get even more plus frames. This is his most plus on block move. It's at plus 16, so you want to be able to land this, right? Let's talk about Thunderbird. So there's a gauge at the bottom left. There's 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3. And once you do a special, whether it's the bomb or the gun, it goes back to level 1. And the higher the level, the more powerful it is, right? So see how many guns there are in level 2 compared to level 1, right? I'll simplify this for you guys. If you're a neutral, you want level 3 for the Thunder Bomb because it goes full screen. It does take a while to build, but again, if they're trying to zone you out, you have plenty of time. Once you get this in, you can go in, you can spam like j.HS, you can get in, then run your mix up, right? The level 1, level 2, they're pretty good like if you want to do it after like a throw, for example. You can do stuff like that. It's pretty good. Level 1, I typically never do. The gun, I don't think the gun's that useful. It has a lot of slow startup, but it can be useful to like punish some things on reaction, like let's say a Kai charged fireball, or let's say Zada's doing a pose full screen. You can just kind of let the gun rip. I actually think the gun's useful at level 1 because it doesn't have that much recovery compared to the gun at level 3, which they can literally just super jump, go watch YouTube for a minute, and then come back, and they still have time to punish, right? Like, it's super punishable on whiff. So you have to be really careful about doing gunshot, especially full screen, because a lot of characters can just super jump, air dash, and then just mess you up for doing a gun. 6H counter hit, mid screen, you get gun. But again, I don't like to do 6H, so that's pretty much it. There's not too much to it. You'd think the security level is a little more complex than it is. It's not actually. Throwing the bomb YRC is like pretty good. You can get like cool stuff like that, but it's pretty gimmicky. I'd rather save my meter. Oh, we talked about Air Behemoth Typhoon too. I didn't really touch on it, but it's not as complex, right? None of them hit overhead. There's some versions that are slower than others that makes them more plus. So something like this. That's actually minus. A lot of the Behemoth Typhoons on block, unless you like happen to do something like that, like if it's a really slow one, it's gonna be minus on block. There's a whole argument about like when you should cancel the Behemoth Typhoon and when you shouldn't in the air. I think it's typically a spacing thing. If you want to frame trap, for example, you can frame trap them with like a delayed 4 to 8 6 Behemoth Typhoon. It's kind of tough, and if like they're crouching, it won't come out right. But generally, I don't like to cancel the Air Behemoth Typhoon too much. It's pretty good for like controlling space too. Like, you just kind of like do it to control space. I think the 4-2-6 is probably one of the better ones. I think one of the best ones in like neutral or pressure is your 2-4-8 version. Because if you delay it, you get a much easier combo. And you get something like that, right? Which is pretty good for frame trapping, right? So the only 2 versions I really do are the 2-4-8 and the 4-2-6, but there might be some benefits to doing the other ones as well. I think that's all the specials. Let's talk about supers. Invincible super, that was the system. Invincible super has 10 frame startup, which isn't the best. It's a little easier safe jump than other supers. You can also do it with a 360 input. You can also do 720 and 1080, which means you just spin your stick twice or your control pad 2 or 3 times. The more times you spin it, the longer startup it has, but the more damage it does. Typically as a reversal, I think your best option is to just stick with the regular one. But in combos, let's say you get the wall splat, you should do the 1080 version because again, it's gonna do more damage, right? As you can see, like how much slower it is, you see it's kind of winding up. One cool thing you can do with this is you can actually PRC the startup. And it's actually invincible. You're canceling the invincible portion and you get to save the meter. So a decent reversal option for Goldlewis. I see you. I see you. And you see how the jab just whiffs? So it could be pretty cool. You can catch them with like a quick grab if they're like trying to bait out your reversal, for example. So let's talk about the laser. This is also based on his danger time meter. I recommend not doing the laser unless you have full meter because it's just that much better. There's only 2 situations I do it. One, in neutral, if they have very, very low health. Or you need to get in, like let's say an Axel, and you don't know how to get in and you need to just get your one chance, you can do laser in neutral. The issue of doing a neutral is they can just run forward. But you see how they kind of get sandwiched, and you can still kind of get a good mix-up. But especially if it's someone that gets higher mobility, they can run over you. The other thing I recommend doing it is if you need the corner Oki, I think some of the best use of meter is just spending meter on your super. So let's say just take a basic combo, get corner Oki, and then you can do whatever you want, right? Typically, I would like wait for to block something out and then go for your high-low, and then you're still plus after that. So yeah, you have a lot of options. It's quite good. All right, so let's talk about combos. I'm only gonna go over the basic combos. There's a lot of character specific combos that require like micro dashes and that sort of thing. I'm gonna teach you the essential combos you need to know, and if you want more, go look at some of the combo guides on YouTube. They're pretty well done. So first combo is, just like a 5k 2D into 628. You'll be doing this a lot. Same thing with like a 5S into that. And that's basically your mid-screen bread and butters. Let's say you get a close 5S. You can do something like this. Run up 5k, or you can do... You can do a 2S into the 6A4, right? Again, generally, you're going to want to end your combos in 6A4 because you get good Oki. You'll see some newer Goldlewis players do something like this. And you don't want to do that because you see how far it pushes them away and you don't get the best Oki. So for example, like especially mid-screen, you gotta chase them and then they can already wake up. One of Goldlewis' strengths is being able to pressure the opponent, and when you push them full screen away, you kind of negate that advantage. One other thing you should know is, let's say you get a counter hit or you punish the DP. There's a couple things you could do. You could do 5S into the pullback. Gives you really good damage. You also have to side swap, so depending on your situation, you might not want to do that. Another thing, let's say you don't have time to get the close 5S, you can do a far 5S into the overhead and get something like that for a DP or a throw punish as well. So let's talk about corner combos. Essentially it's the same idea, except you can use the wall bounce, right? So instead of doing the overhead, you can just do something like this. Overhead. You do the overhead twice. There's a lot of different corner variations. I personally think sometimes you should keep the corner. So in order to keep the corner, you could do something like this. And that way you keep the corner, but you do a little less damage. So yeah, you can do that too, slightly more optimal. Yeah, so this is, you can obviously reset here too. So it would look something like this, right? If they don't have burst, they don't have like invincible reversal, or like you're low on health, typically I would recommend keeping the corner. If the match just started or they have like burst or they have DPRC, I recommend just breaking the wall because it's going to be hard to bait out those options. All right, so let's talk about strategy. How do you get in with this character? So start of the round, you can 5S. It's actually pretty dominant. Start of the round beats a lot of common options. They can beat it by like a 6P, or if they have a faster 5S than you. JD is also really good start of the round. It will beat, and it'll go over a lot of stuff. You can also just wait for a little bit and then do a button. Like let's say they're like trying to 6P your 5S, because that's the thing. 6Ps are pretty good against Goldlewis. You just wait a little bit, poke with something like this. Another thing I like to do at the start of the round, so you can buffer your Behemoth Typhoon at the start of the round, and then you could do the 684 Behemoth Typhoon. I think that's also a really good start of the round option. So alternate between those, and ideally you just get your game started off the start of the round. But more often than not, they'll back away, which is pretty smart. And now you're in neutral. So what do? Well, you have a few options. You could just kind of play passive, spam some jump Ds, spam some jump S's, throw some 5S's out just to kind of control space in the case they're trying to go in. And you can wait to build up meter for your Thunderbird. Thunderbird's really good at level 3. Once you get this in, they kind of have to follow it, and the only thing you can really do is back off full screen. But if you're controlling space, they're going to go to the corner, or they're going to try to jump over, which you can preemptively jump S, right? And remember to cancel that jump S into air dash. The other thing is, you know, you could try to go in. His jumps are pretty good. They're very hard to anti-air. So that you kind of have to be, like, let's try to anti-air Goldlewis on reaction, right? It's pretty hard, especially in the middle of a match. So a lot of people will try to do it preemptively, and then you can try to wait for their 6P and preemptively punish. If you're getting 6P'd out of your instant jump normals, you're spamming them way too much, right? Which means you need to stay a little more patient on the ground, throw some 2S's to try to beat the 6Ps, or throw some Behemoth Typhoons to break the 6Ps, right? This is a really good far range option to do, so you kind of just throw those out. One other recommendation if you're having trouble getting in, dash block is obviously good in this game. You dash FD block, but as told, didn't matter. Yeah, see, it just makes it look like you're blocking faster. You also want to make sure you mix up your jumps, so instead of just doing jump, you know, you could do a super jump, change up the timing. You can also do jump air dash. You can also do super jump air dash. So you have 4 different ways to approach from the air, and you have some pretty good grounded pokes, right? So as long as you mix them up pretty well, that game plan will work against like 90% of the cast, right? The other 10% of the cast is Axel. And Axel, you know, I'm not going to talk too much about it. It's a hard matchup, let's be real. But there's things you can do. You know, you could 6P his 5P. Again, use your air options, try to get in. You can also FD break under the 5P. Once you're in, you just get in, right? So depends who you're playing, but you do have a lot of options to use the neutral. Once you're in, right? Let's say you do a jump D, you land a knockdown. What do? Well, you have a few options. I'm gonna go into the basics. If you want a more detailed Oki guide, please check the description below. You can do something like a meaty Thunderbird. That can be DP'd. It's kind of risky. They can also sometimes, if you like mistime it, you mash out. So typically, I just like to go for what we call a safe jump, something that avoids invincible supers. So if you time your j.HS right, or your jump D, it'll hit them, and if they do a super, you can block, right? After this, I'll go for something like a 5S, and then you can go into a frame trap, you can go low, or you can go overhead. And you just kind of rinse and repeat, get them to the corner as soon as you can. The other thing to mention, Goldlewis is really good at conditioning you to block. So once you get them conditioned to block, make sure you grab. Grabs also beat DPs in this game. So, you know, practice the timing. If you're more advanced Goldlewis, practice the timing or to grab someone's DP. And then what do you do on defense, right? Unfortunately, his defense kind of sucks. Let's be real. You know, 2Ps probably like your best throw out, but I like to jump forward a lot in defense. So there's a technique called fuzzy jumping. I have a YouTube video in the description below about that as well. But basically it means jumping at a timing so that you block immediate attack, but then you jump out and then throw something like a jump D out. So doing something like this, block it for a little bit, throwing a jump D is a really strong option because again, his short hop is really good. But other than that, you kind of have to rely on the defensive mechanics, right? Backdash, of course, don't forget about that. Wire C on block. I don't think Goldlewis uses meter the best out of most characters. Like, you're just going to be typically RCing plus on block moves anyways. And you can't really use RC meter to get in other than like a random super. So considering saving it for defense, right? Considering saving it for FD, consider saving it for YRC. And don't be afraid to burst early. Gold Dickinson has a lot of health, which means if you burst at the start of the round, there's a chance you can get it later in the round, right? Because you have to take more hits to die. What should you start working on first? Get the basic bread and butters down. If you aren't comboing into 684, make sure you learn the combo into 684. That's essential. That's the first thing I'd practice, is learn the combos and making sure you can consistently go into 684 Behemoth Typhoon, because it changes completely how the character plays. Then other than that, just work on strategy, right? Start implementing some of the neutral tools, like make sure you're using all of his jumps in neutral. Make sure you know what you do on Oki when you get a hit, and just play more, right? I mean, a lot of this comes with experience, and there's a lot that I didn't cover in the guide, so just keep playing and, you know, watch your replays, take note of what you could be doing better. learn from strong Goldlewises and implement that stuff into your gameplay. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them below. Try my best to answer, or if you have anything else to help newer players pick up this character, please leave in the comments below. And as always, if you appreciate the content, please consider like, sharing, subscribing. It really helps out the video and really helps get this information out there so more people can learn the character and we can have competent Goldlewises in tournaments. So everyone, thank you so much for watching, and if you have any feedback or suggestions, catch me on Twitch. I stream 2-3 days a week, link in the description below. With that being said, thanks for watching. Have a great day.